much to I'm looking at the justice of it all, and I'm working with the executives in the company. I'm telling them what's happening. Like, look, this is what they're doing, and I don't like it. I don't like it on behalf of the company. And long story short, the powers that be went above my head. They made the deal at the executive level, which was fine because I didn't want to be held responsible for someone else's bad behavior within the company. And it's a deal that that I was compensated for, and but I what I was trying to do and the deal that I was trying to get done for the company would not have been as lucrative. Then if it makes sense. So my good intentions to save money for the company did not come through. So I made more in terms of the windfall than I would have if I, got my point across and held the line and was able to get the company what I thought was best for it.
Welcome to the Weekly Transit, interviews and conversations from an astrological lens. There's nothing more fascinating to me about this earth than the people who inhabit it. My mission is to create deep, vulnerable, and open conversations that invite our unique guests to share the arc of their ever-evolving journey through life in the hope that their stories inspire and resonate with you, our listeners. I'm your host, Scott Tajarian. Welcome to the Weekly Transit. I'm your host, Scott Tajarian, here with Drew Maristch. Drew is someone I've worked with off and on for the last, maybe 4 or 5 years or so. And a very interesting individual, has, a fascinating story to share, and expressed some interest to come on and to share. And I was like, yes, of course. I'd love to have a conversation with you and to hear more about your story. Because, as I work with people, I don't generally, ask questions unless you're somebody that I'm working with like on a weekly basis. Like, I don't ask questions. You share whatever you want to share with me, but I'm sharing just like your astrological code. And so I know a lot about you and your life, but then there's a lot that I don't know about you that I'm interested in hearing about. So, welcome, Drew.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for, you're welcome. Thanks for being here. Let's start off at the beginning, if you don't mind. I mean, first of all, just inform the audience of your primal triad. You are a Cancer Sun, a 12th house Cancer Sun, a 6th house Aquarius Moon, and a Leo rising. So, yes. Tell us, Drew. Like, who are you? Where do you come from? Tell us your story.
Who am I, or who I was? I mean, that's really
It's an
the
evolution,
catch, right?
Yeah, it's an evolution.
And starting from the beginning, kind of us, where we started, you were kind enough when I worked this Unpacking Grief project with Ian to be not only you were our final guest, but most popular from every every metric that I saw. You're well viewed, and it was great that your participation was key in helping to get the word out. And as I said, I before we started recording, in terms of the efficacy of the project and what I wanted to do in terms of taking my story, taking everything that had happened with Zach and transmuting it into something, didn't know what at the time. And a podcast was the ultimate result, and it just kind of fell into my lap. Ian made everything very easy. We did a limited series, 6 episodes, and that was kind of the catalyst and catapult of making into perpetuity, really a place for this content, and recognizing that I don't intend to speak to everyone. Certainly, I could find some commonality and some traction with other bereaved parents, who might see this. But certainly, my experience with grief is wide ranging. But I find myself here today with this mission, really as a result of losing Zachary, my 20-year-old son, back in April of 21.
Yeah, so let's fill the audience in for those that don't know. I mean, first of all, Ian, who you mentioned, is a friend. who you met through me, Ian McDonald, and you did a podcast briefly with him, unpacking grief,
Unpacking grief.
unpacking grief, and so and you mentioned the loss of your son Zach. So can you go into the impetus of the podcast, losing Zach? Share what you want to share about that experience.
Yeah. So, in the grand scheme of things, and I'll go into it more in a chronological standpoint, but when I lost Zach in April of 21, my life was turned upside down. My only son, we're very close, and it, I both, I died with him. A part of me, a huge part of me, died with him that day. And it's interesting that it had taken so many years and perspective and kind of introspection of my situation, observing the people around me, the energies, the relationships that, went away, not for any cause other than the fact that, I've come to realize that I was in a place where a lot of people couldn't really relate with me anymore. Even some of my closest friends. I mean, my tribe, and, including you folks on the West Coast, who were there at Ground Zero. We had just started. We were recording a lot of content on the radio show that you had put together that Ian was hosting. But at that time, I really realized that I was alone. I was nothing. I felt that when I heard the words of the doctor telling me and then the hospital that Zach didn't make it, I remember standing in an empty corridor and literally, I could have been floating in space. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. There was nothing around me, and my life was changed forever. And within my healing period, there was later on an ability, after having first reconnected with Deanna from my childhood, and us getting married in September of that year. The idea came up to start to document Zach's story and talk about my process and things that I went through and different, revelations and things that I had learned along the way to help, continue on a path to healing. And then you're never really, there's never really, you're not filling a gas tank that says, oh, he's healed. You go up to 3/4, he's almost healed. It's a constant process. And I don't really like to use the labels of healed, unhealed, because as I address other parents and folks who are living with grief, I recognize the fact that they look at that word one way, this person looks at it another, and it really isn't useful in quantifying that emotion and going through it. So, in terms of meeting people where they were, creating that 6-episode piece of work, I was reserved and happy with the fact that it could be found by anyone who was meant to find it. And if they were able to get some valuable information from it and apply it in their life, whether not just from the grief standpoint, but also from a coming back to yourself standpoint. And even though we talk a lot about ego death and, detaching from all that, it's odd because before you do that, you actually do have to come back to ground zero, because if you skip that, the healing is incomplete. It has to be back and rooted in, okay, when you stand on your own 2 feet, and in ego you can say, I am a bereaved parent, I am an orphan, and move forward in that way. So that's kind of where the journey went after that. My life got really complicated for the last couple of years after, with mom, who was 84 and starting to show the wear and tear and have some issues. And luckily, Deanna and I, we were her primary caretakers there. And then only 6 months after mom passed, and Father's Day of last year, Deanna had a heart attack, and the cause was a congenital heart defect that had gone, undetected through, 50 years.
Wow.
And that started her on a journey where they found she had a myocardial bridge. so many people are dealing with it. There's not a lot of information out there. She was fortunate enough to get the corrective surgery that she needed back in December of last year, and then start the healing. But at the same time, for her, it was another loss of for me and her. She was saying goodbye to the Deanna that came before the open heart surgery. That Deanna was gone. The trials and everything that she had to go through in making it through surgery, and sleeping in a recliner for 6 months, and looking around and trying to make sense of all that had happened to her, and say, well, geez, it's not supposed to be this way. I'm now a grandmother, and two grandchildren, and a family I love dearly, and here I am alone in a basement, and I don't know what the next day will bring.
Mm.
So from that standpoint, and from my standpoint, from the deep bond and love and relationship that we have, I was mourning the loss of the spouse that I had known, and being a caretaker separate of that, so it's a very it was a very trying run, and I think it does come through in some of the astrology. But going back to the beginning, and kind of how I've been able to synthesize everything that has happened, I feel that much like the goat in Capricorn season, I'm up on a hill, and looking down at my past and my story, and the guy that was Drew in the early 70s, and the guy that, people came to know in grade school or high school, or came to forget. Um, you know, my destiny was sealed the day I was born, as you would, comment. But the my household as a child, I was the youngest of four. There were 10 years between me and my older sibling,
Oh wow. And
which was a trip.
you all have the same parents?
Yeah. Mhm.
And
Yeah, I was a
you
happy
grew
accident.
mm.
My mom, actually, my mom was on birth control. She had an IUD,
Oh
whatever
wow.
popular technology was at the time,
Yeah.
and the stories that I heard, I won't be too graphic here, but nevertheless, whatever happened that day, it was certainly meant to be. And
Yeah.
9 months later, um,
So what's the distance between you and the next oldest?
yeah, that's 10 years between me
10.
and my brother Dave. Yeah.
And so the oldest child is how much older than you?
And so my sister Donna is 65. So it's
Okay.
15, yeah, she's 15 years older.
15
And I have
years.
a
So
brother sandwiched in between, another brother, Michael, who
okay.
is 13 years older than me.
Dave, Michael, and your
And
sister
Donna. Mhm.
Donna. Dave,
And,
Michael, and Donna. Uh-huh.
respectively, Dave's a Cancer, Michael's a Taurus, and Donna is an Aries.
Okay. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, you show up to this family that's all well and baked. You were living in Philadelphia, or
Yeah,
where?
South Philly row home,
Okay.
2 bedrooms.
Uh huh.
And for me, when I came along, even though it was later in the game, it still wasn't a lot of space. I shared a room with two of the siblings for a good stretch, and
Now
then I was
there.
an only child
Yeah.
from from 13 on, when everyone had grown up, met their mates,
Uh huh.
married. One was in the Marines, pursuing a career, and everyone gets spread out far and wide. So that's where I got to live the life of an only child, even though I'm within, four siblings,
Mm-hmm.
three siblings.
And your name is Andrew Maristch the Third. So
Yes.
is that your father?
Hmm.
And so maybe he was he like, oh well, I got this extra son, I might as well name him after. I
I
mean, because like the third,
yes,
you'd think that
it
the
would have
first
came. The
child,
first son would have
the
been
first
the
son, yeah,
yeah,
exactly, not the
yeah.
accident.
Yeah,
How did that
and it was
all come?
interesting, and the naming schemes. I mean, we have the name Michael that actually had been traced back. My cousin did work on the family tree. It's 6 generations. There's a Michael in every generation, including
Hmm.
going to Zachary. So make it 7 now. But my brother
Hmm.
Mike is a Michael Andrew.
Hmm.
My sister is a Donna Marie. oddly enough, my mom is a Helen Marie and Deanna is a Deanna Marie. So there's the Marie and
Wow.
Michael commonalities, which are just pretty trippy as well.
Wow.
But in that environment, you gotta realize it's the '70s. My dad was a truck driver. My mom was a housemaker, and he was long distance when I was a baby, and then he was a local driver when I was getting older. But the times in the house, without going into too much detail, was I'll just call it there was a lot of disharmony.
Mm-hmm.
I've come to learn that you don't realize the ecosystem of relationships going on within a household. The relationship that my sister as a firstborn had with mom and dad is far different than any relationship. She's the only girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you step down in the relationship that collectively that Michael and Donna had with our parents, how that informed the household, and then and so on and so forth. So it's realizing that everyone's growing at the same time is really hard to do for a lot of people. And I think that's where a lot of resentment comes in, and an inability to see others in their natural state, as a human who found a mate and had a child and who was imperfect or working, and we all are perfect, certainly, but
Mm-hmm.
working on our things. So um, my dad was working on a lot of things, to the degree a truck driver could. My mom was going through her stuff, and I found myself in a place where I developed a hero complex, in a sense. So,
So you
so
felt
those are
like
the earliest.
you had to like take care of the family. You had to like save the family in some way
Not as
from the
a yeah.
tension.
So in an not from a Superman standpoint, but
Mm-hmm.
yes, definitely an impression that um, even though I had three other siblings, I couldn't look around and trust that I could be passive and everything would be okay.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself at a young age, throwing myself into a hazardous situation again. Turmoil is turmoil. The house in the '70s, they're screaming, hollering, and but then around that and whatever was in my code that was unlocked through viewing that, I found myself in that mindset, and that's something that had stayed with me all my life.
I like that
So
term house in the '70s because I can relate to that too. I mean, lots of screaming and yelling and yeah, it's an
you know,
intense environment. So
yeah, my dad would come home with us. I mean, his money was in an envelope, and I can remember, like if it was a Friday and I got to count his money, he might have gotten paid $300-400 at the
mm-hmm.
end of the week.
Yeah, yeah.
So again, it's no different than today, certainly on a scale. I mean, a lot of people are under the same conditions, circumstances, trying to make
Mm-hmm.
ends meet with one job.
Mm-hmm.
Many with two, but that was a defining situation in our home.
And so
Money
why?
relationship with it.
Yeah, so money was tight, so that created tension in the home.
Mhm.
Why did your dad name you after him and not uh, your?
That is a that's one I'll never know the answer to.
No one asked
Uh,
him.
No, I think at the end of the day, if you get an oops or a happy accident baby after 10 years and he hadn't had an opportunity to be, to name a child after him, I'd say, well, here we go. And I
But he
think
did.
that,
He did have an opportunity though. But he chose Michael instead of.
yeah,
Or is
well,
his name
Michael,
Michael? Is he?
his my brother's godfather is a Michael, which is my dad's brother.
Uh huh. So he wanted to
So,
name him after his brother. It was like respect to the brother. And
yeah.
then yeah, okay.
And then he had Andrew as a middle name.
Uh huh.
So, so there's representation
Is
there.
your middle name Michael?
I have none.
You have no middle name.
I no,
Okay.
no, just as my
Yeah.
father and my grandfather. Yeah, yeah, another
Okay.
oddity of things.
Yeah. So
But
interesting.
yeah,
Fascinating. So
yeah,
you're going to school, money's tight,
hmm,
there's tension in the home.
oh yeah.
What was elementary school and high school like for you?
Well, elementary school and high school were elementary school was actually enjoyable,
Mhm.
and rooting our history with Deanna, right? I mean, we,
When
you know,
did you guys connect? What year was that?
so 79 is our first picture together in kindergarten.
Wow, so you were in kindergarten together.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow. And
yeah.
you were together in the same class all the way through high school?
No, so
You
kindergarten we were together. She
Uh-huh.
went away to a Catholic grade school.
Okay.
I went to the ongoing middle school for where I went at Stephen
So
Gerard.
when did you split off? You were in a class from
We
K,
split
so
off.
you went.
We split off a couple times, but so 80 and then 1985 is one year that comes into play. Deanna was a ballet. She was in ballet, and she was Clara in the Nutcracker. So it was the perfect
Huh.
time of year. And I remember that the local paper came to the school and again added to our little brag book album that we have. Um, Most of the classmates were holding Deanna up in the air. She had her
Mhm.
costume on, she had her nutcracker, and I was a safety in the safety patrol, and I'm pictured down on the ground
Hmm.
and literally just like looking up at her. And I
Huh.
remember feeling like the awe that I had of her even back
Wow.
then. And I joke around. It's soul contracts were renewed in '85. It's what I read
But
from various.
that was just being in a play together. You weren't in
We
school.
weren't even in play. No, we were in
No.
school together, but she was a dancer independently outside of school, a
And you
performer.
were the photo of you looking up at her, you were
Just in the
in.
classroom. Yeah, just all
Oh,
in our
okay.
whatever grade we were in at that point.
So you were
So
in the same grade in 80, like you were in the same school together, same grade.
yep, yep. So
And
that
then
was '85 through '89. In '89, so in 10th grade, I opted out. I started getting restless, and the safety net that grade school and high school had given
Mhm.
me, and all those friends, it had started to, yeah, I wasn't having it. I was restless. I
What
didn't know what I
happened?
wanted. I wanted to go to Central. I wanted to go to a different school.
Uh-huh.
I was not conflicts. These were people like that I'm friends with, your grade
Yeah.
school kids, but I wasn't in the group with the popular kids, and I wasn't, so I was kind of an outsider. And as others grow up and they are trying to sort through their various, challenges, I found that I guess, I might have been an easy way to, exercise their kind of things. I was bullied, picked on, that sort of thing. And yeah, I
So
got
you were
tired
having
of
a
it.
hard time at this school. People were
Yeah,
bullying you, they were picking on you, and you
yeah,
wanted to get out of there,
yeah,
obviously.
yeah. It
And so
wasn't horrible, but it was not what I wanted.
and that's where
And
she was going to school too.
yeah, so that's where she reminds me often that I was the one who left. I left high
Mm.
school. We had each gone on, and certainly, she was a younger, her first marriage was, at a young age, her first child, she
Hmm.
was around, she was 20, 21. And, she started her life
So she got married right after high school.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. And did so you ended up transferring to another high school or you just dropped
Yeah.
out?
No, I transferred to Central High School, and I was
Okay.
there for 10th and 11th grade. By the end of 11th grade, I had not met the requirements to stay in Central High School, which was actually the best high school in the city at the time.
Hmm.
That may have also been the ego because my dad was my dad had a eighth grade education,
Hmm.
drove a truck, and he was very demanding in terms of me in school. And as a child, knowing I was smart, knowing I was intelligent, I always had an issue with others grading me. I had an issue with the whole structure, and was always, I kept it to myself, but it came out in other ways. It came out in how I did life back then. And so what I didn't like, and I could change. I did. I was very blessed that my mom, as a Virgo, was a was not hands on. She didn't. She really didn't persuade me one way or another. And the things that I
Hmm.
thought, she'd be running out of the house with her hair on fire. Wait, what do you mean you're going to a different school? I wanted to move to Florida. I just wanted to go. And so that didn't happen. I ended up in Central. I was shown the door in 11th grade. And then I finished my high school career at the armpit of the Philly school system, Southern High, South Philadelphia High School.
And what was the
And
first high school you were at? What was
the
that look
first high
like?
school was Girard Academic Music Program, GAMP. It was a magnet school. Pretty much everyone played an instrument. All the students were in a choir. They performed every year. They had, they're very talented
What
students.
was your instrument?
I played the cello for a bit.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
a couple of years I played the cello.
So this is all interesting, everything you're sharing, just, I'm thinking about your chart because like you're a 12th house sun and Mercury. The 12th house is the house of the unconscious. When I think of music, I think of Pisces or the 12th house because music is something that draws you into the unconscious. And you mentioned the challenges that you've experienced like in the social dynamic in school, like you were born with Pluto aligning with your moon.
Mm,
So Pluto's the god of death and the moon's the planet of emotions, and your moon is in Aquarius, which is the sign that represents the community or the group. So going through difficult transformations in terms of the group that you are a part of or the people that you're emotionally connected to, you go through these transformations. Now, it's you mentioned like intelligence, like your dad was really pushing you
mm,
because he knew you were intelligent, and like Aquarius, where your moon is, that is the sign of intelligence,
mm.
of
My
logic,
dad was an
and so.
Aquarius sun.
Yeah, so we not always, but often see these reflections between parents and children with the primal triad. But yeah,
Mm,
it's interesting you said like your mom is a Virgo, is very hands off because Virgo can be a very controlling sign as well. So it's not necessarily laid back and chill. I mean, I guess it can be if it's they can be very submissive
mm.
and subdued, but at the same time they can be very critical, very analytical. So it'd be interesting to see what the rest of your mom's chart is to kind of get that reflection over uh,
Yeah.
her laid back nature. But so you went to three high schools,
Mm.
and you
I do want to
were.
say, in terms of
Yeah.
mom,
Uh-huh.
she, to the degree that it's counterintuitive to what you would expect based on her chart, I think that at that time she was very much out of control in her life itself.
Mm,
So that is likely one of the reasons that, things may have started, in an early range. And then if she had been satisfied with how things are going, she might have said, "Well, let's just be hands off," and she was,
yeah.
and I credit her with I credit her with everything. I mean,
Mm,
does it not to take away from Dad, because in my own healing, I've been able to come to terms with the fact that his role, whether it's an antagonist or protagonist, whatever, however you want to label him, while his role looked different and felt different as a child, it was essential as well. Without the guidance and the impressions from both parents, I wouldn't
yes.
be me exactly. I mean, it was a perfect mix, despite being uncomfortable, finding reasons to be upset with my situation growing up and my relationship with
Mm,
my dad, which I wish could have been better.
yes. Yes. Well, that's I can relate. I mean, that's life with the parents. They're it's not always as easy as you want it to be or as fulfilling as you want it to be. And when you look back, you wish you could have maybe done some things differently or uh, but there's it's interesting when you look at an astrological code because when you think of parents, like they're defined from a few different areas. The moon would be the mother, the nurturer, the Saturn would be the authority or the father. It's not necessarily gender specific, but um, then there's also the midheaven and the IC, which are always opposite to each other. And so, the one is usually the mother, the other is the father. And so, like, the 10th house in your 10th house is in Aries, which
Okay.
is the warrior, and that sounds like more like your father, somebody who, ruled with an iron fist, so to speak, where the IC, which is opposite the midheaven, could be described as the mother, is Libra, which is more peaceful.
Oh,
So,
wow. Okay.
that's the balance that you experience, where your dad was really kind of gruff or hard edged maybe, and your mom was more peaceful with you.
Yeah, that's great. And it's interesting too, because certainly the fact that I'm, Deanna and I, as, parents of our, different children, um, we very quickly understood our parenting dynamic and what it would look like had it been deployed back then, in terms of her hand as a Capricorn, and my hand as a Cancer, and the
Yeah.
fact that I'm so home oriented, and the fact that,
Mhm.
I do tell her, and um, I've always gravitated to and it's probably because of my moon, feminine energy. I am a man's man, and I've got my buddies and stuff. But growing up, there was a period that, as I could only be lifted up by my tribe of women that I was very close with, my good
Mm.
friends that I consider family and friends with now.
So your
So
friends
it's
in high
also,
school, a lot of your friends in high school were women, were the girls? Yeah.
and it was very
Uh-huh.
platonic. It's
Yeah.
hard for some
Uh-huh.
folks to understand, but they're
No, yeah,
relationships that
totally.
I value, and I keep. I've been lucky to have a lot of good friends,
Yeah.
and people in my life that I the collector in me has always been one to reach out. So as I changed jobs, I was in my career, in my working career that I got to, I was in a situation that was very friendly to how I was built, in that I wasn't sitting at a desk for 20 years, punching my card every day, bringing my lunch pail in. There was variety. There was different industries to be a part of. The work that I did was oriented towards operations, and then eventually real estate, which is I would identify myself more as a real estate guy now than ever. Although I'm also struggling with the go forward of, I am nothing. This is what I do. I am not that.
Mm.
And stepping forward at this time, and looking into the future. I told you, the teaser about comedy and healing, and still being able to do both, and using the tools that I created in a different way, and knowing that I can't do it wrong. I won't do it wrong. And every bit of energy that I put towards this, with the intention of bringing healing to others, I'm doing my work. That's why I wanted to sit with you. That's
Mm.
why I wanted to have this conversation and reinvigorate the mission, because I couldn't be more clear on what I want to do, and how I can help. To say humanity sounds like,
Mm.
wow, but
Mm.
literally, how
No,
can how can we help humanity? It just,
you want to do
I'm not
your
picking and
part.
choosing. I'm not.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll help
Yeah.
you, but I won't help
Yeah.
you. I'll help
Yeah.
you over there. No, it's humanity. It's like,
Yeah.
if you're not hungry, you're not gonna hold your hand out for
Mm.
bread. But if you are hungry, and you are tired, and you are, drugged down by this grief or whatever you're feeling. I mean, life beats you down if you let it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way out of every possible scenario, situation that's been brought forth. And that, from a standpoint of grief, I don't only talk about grief. I've been blessed enough to, articulate all my emotions, and now be able to apply it, and see rather quickly the pain of others, and be able to help them through it. And to that end, go into through the restlessness of high school and dropping out. Then it was going into the world, and saying, okay, I know I got to work. I was always a worker. I always made a living, and to start out in the workforce, I held on to that job, my first job,
So you didn't
with
go you didn't go to college after high school. You
no,
started working. And
no.
what was that first job?
That first job was in the mailroom. It was
Where?
with MCS Group. It was a law firm that I worked in. A good friend that I played hockey with. He worked in a medical copy, office mailroom services company, and I ran a small account in a law firm. And I was my own boss. It was a scenario where I could interact with the folks and professionals around me, and I learned how to sit in front of an attorney who is, probably not the nicest guy in the world. I realized really quickly that, yeah, attorneys, we put them on a pedestal, and these professionals as well. Look how many years they went to school, and then I found myself in a mailroom once, doing copies for a case that involved Walt Disney Company. And Michael Eisner was the CEO at the time. And one of the biggest things that impacted me at that age, copying this stuff, was a handwritten memo from Michael Eisner. And imagine me, the gumption to start with, in my mind with the red pen, I'm reading this. I'm like, wait a second. This is the CEO of Disney. This is Michael Eisner. Where did he come from? How did he get where he was? He went to broadcast school. He took a path that was more in line with where he ended up. But I realized rather quickly, he just had a bachelor degree, nothing great. He had the right path. He was in the right place at the right time, and it showed me a lot. So you look at that as a kid who thought everything hinged on my scholastic performance. Everything hinged on a high school degree that I didn't have. Everything hinged on going to college. If you didn't, you'd be a failure. And here I am saying, well, wait a second. What he did is great, but there's a different way for me. And while I wasn't able to see the path exactly, I knew that it was out there, and that was my way forward. So I got into I got into introspection. There was a book, Please Understand Me. I think it was the Kelsey Temperament Sorter, and basically it there are a lot of different tools out there that people use, and they're out there especially today. But the Kelsey Temperament Sorter was basically introvert, extrovert, judgmental, sensitive, thinking, feeling, judgmental, or intuitive. And there's 16 different combinations that you could have. And I started there because I'm interacting with a world that I just didn't understand. I felt like a lot of people were doing things wrong, not incorrectly, just wrong. And I felt like I was taking the brunt of other people's bad behavior, or so I thought.
So you were seeing incompetence at your work where you were working, and when you were in the
No, just in my
mailroom, or
personal
in
relationships, just
personal relationships?
as a again, even though I was doing it, I was timid when I was doing it. You're not always going forward in confidence. You go forward with your best intention and put your best foot forward. And the work was never the problem. It's the interactions and being able to work with the CEOs of the company, or the attorneys, and or the secretaries and the paralegals, all a different kettle of fish, and who behave and deal with you differently. And for a guy who's an outsider, it's very easy to have someone speak to you in a certain way, but if you were to reciprocate, you're out of the job.
You'd be in trouble. Yeah.
So so it was a matter of like, okay, well, why is this happening? I need to understand why I'm reacting this way. I need to know who I am, and how can I do that, right? So how can I make the focus smaller and start from there and then work my way back out?
It's interesting. It's like I'm seeing a thread here where it's like you were raised in a home where there was a lot of aggression and bullying by family. Then you move to the school and you experience that in high school, and to the point where you have to leave your high school to go to a different high school so that you can feel comfortable in where you are, and then you end up in a job where there is that same sort of.
Adversarial.
Yes, exactly. It's interesting because you are a very sensitive soul. As a Cancer sun, you identify with your emotional nature and with your experiences of the past. And so, your south node though is also in Cancer. So it's like your growth in this life is to become the authority, is to be the one who's in charge, and it's fifth house. So that's your north node in Capricorn in the fifth house. So in a sense, you're here to be the king, to be the authority. And so you're talking about, wanting to be of service to others, and that's great and everything. But really thinking of yourself as the hero is a good place for you to be, So it's you are meant to be the hero. You're meant to achieve a certain level of greatness in your life that that satisfies your heart and the joyful nature of your heart. But having that south node in Cancer in the 11th house, which is Aquarius, Aquarius, it can be very harsh, can be very cold. And so when you are experiencing the cold, detached emotions of other people who are not sensitive to
Mm.
what you're feeling, that's when you're in a frequency that is depleting to you.
Imagine how that affected me in my personal relationships.
Yeah.
Imagine how that affected a single father who was out there. I mean,
So tell me about.
Zachary was always my first priority, certainly. But when I'm a 20-something-year-old man going into 30s,
How old were you
and
when Zach came into your
I
life?
was
How
29.
29.
29.
And who's his mother? Who was this person? You're a
Oh,
single father.
so she
So
was this was the best friend of a colleague of mine at work. Introduced us before New Year's of 2000, and so I do want to put three things out there that we'll talk about more in detail in terms of
yeah.
my gifts, the things that I've been able to get clarity on. My intuition, uh, I know for a fact that was one of my gifts. For better or worse, the things that I have can sense happening. I just have a unique.
That's the 12th house frequency of your
Okay.
12th house sun and your 12th house
Right.
Mercury. I mean, that's the most intuitive point. The moon is also, your moon is also aligning with Neptune. Neptune is the planet of intuition. So,
Mhm.
when you take something on emotionally, you have an intuitive sense
Mhm.
of what this emotion is bringing you or what these feelings are bringing you. So you have a very strong intuition through your emotional sensitivities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the way I would also characterize it, I'll never forget when someone talked to me about how a dog, their sense of smell is like so great. And basically they said, if you get a pizza delivered to your door, you open the door, you say, wow, I smell pizza. That's great. But when the dog smells the pizza, he said, I smell the basil. I smell the
Yeah.
cheese. I can smell the
Yeah.
crust. I can smell the layers. And really I never decided to do these things, but where I am at in life, it's literally whatever the layers of the ingredients of my life pizza is. I've been so in tune to be able to see each specific ingredient for what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if people can get to that point, the waters become less muddy. You can move forward and be deliberate in the things that, again, I want to impress upon people. Now is the time to step forward. The projects that you've been thinking about to do that you haven't had the heart to, now is the
Mm.
time. This is here for you to push forward, for things to make changes, drastic or otherwise. This is really the time you're going to be supported. The analogy, I was a gamer, right? So kids of the 70s are probably the young gamers of the 80s, and the
Mm.
cheat codes that used to come. And imagine, playing a game for 8 years and just struggling through it. You love the game, you have to play it. It's the only game. But then
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden you're armed with the cheat codes. And how much more fun is the
What
game
was
to
that
play?
game? What was that game for you? Do you remember?
Well, Super Mario Brothers was great,
Uh-huh.
because there were a few things. There was You could do this little thing and jump on the tortoise shell, to
Uh-huh.
get yourself all these lives, and you get infinite lives. So that's the first one. And then there are screens that you can access through certain maneuvers. And, you can get you can skip levels. So I found myself really enjoying the game, and I could skip from level 1 to 4 and from 4 to 8 and play through the end that way. And then, there's also John
That's
Madden, football and
yeah.
different cheat codes. And so we're combining both the cheat codes and the, Easter eggs that they employ. And it makes things more enjoyable and makes it easy to get through it. And we're not
Mm.
trying to get it through it to completion. We're trying to get through it to peace.
How do you find these?
How do I find
How did you find these cheat codes? You just hear from
Oh
other
yeah, so
people?
they used to have magazines, so they had companion
Mm.
magazines they would publish with some of the games.
Mm-hmm.
Zelda was another favorite.
Oh
So
yeah.
you would go in there, and there was a casino, and it would teach you where to go, the maps, and just to give you a leg up. So intuition was one thing I wanted to
Well,
expand
that's
upon.
also, I just want to say that's very in tune with your ascendant in
Hmm,
Leo, because
okay.
Leo is the sign that represents games,
Uh,
playfulness.
oh,
So
games.
yeah,
I
it's
love them.
the essence of your soul.
Yeah, I make up
Is
games.
yeah.
Around the house. I was just with my sister-in-law and their kids, and I see this. They got a big cutout over their stairway. I said, you know what I would
Mm.
do? I'd get a ball, tie a string to it, and put solo cups down at the bottom. Drop the ball down and play bowling, and
Uh-huh.
see if you can knock it. And like, so yeah, there was always inventing. It was also a way to keep myself company. Domino
Mhm.
rally, playing things that were self-sustaining, magic tricks, throwing cards.
Hmm.
Those were all things that I would occupy. I kept to myself. I was a lot of solitary time. The years that my dad was home before he got Alzheimer's, and that's kind of where we're at in the time thread here.
Yeah.
Um,
When did that?
you know,
So when did that happen? You got
so so
Alzheimer's after high school?
so
When?
91, 92. He was an early onset case. He was diagnosed at age 55. He was born
Wow.
in 36. So right at 91, things were getting heavy. It was only me and mom to deal with it. He had an episode at home. I slept through it, unfortunately.
What happened?
It was pretty intense. He lost his wallet. He thought my mom had hid it from him. And in the middle of the night, he woke up. He woke her up by he grabbed her by her feet, pulled her out of bed
Oh my
in
God.
the middle of the night, and she was horrified, and I was horrified that I slept through it. And when I woke up the next day, there was actually a paddy wagon outside, and I didn't know what was going on, but that was the last. It was for the best. Seeing your dad taken out in a paddy wagon, knowing that something's wrong, but not having the details at that point. You just see it. You come down and you're like, what is happening?
That
And
paddy wagon, that means like the police are coming to take him or
yeah,
something?
she didn't know what to do. There was
Uh-huh.
little known about Alzheimer's at the time, and that's when our education trajectory just took off.
Uh-huh.
We learned that he had Alzheimer's. He was lucky to be able to get access to. Um, he was in the Air Force, so he was able to, get into a government facility for care until he
Uh-huh.
passed. He was there at passed at age 62 in Coatesville, the VA hospital there in
What
Coatesville.
was that?
It actually just passed. It was December 19th was his anniversary of his passing
Which
in
year?
1998.
98. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
so as I reconciled with that, the transmutation with losing dad under those circumstances and Alzheimer's and hockey, I started a charity hockey game. And it was a small scale project, but I was proud to have done 4 of them at the time. The flagship event was actually at Sovereign Bank Arena right after 9/11. So that was, and there was anthrax scares were going on, if you may remember that back at that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And we were in Trenton for the game. It was the Trenton Sovereign Bank Arena. Zach was 10 months old. And
Mm.
it was a great game. We played with the Flyers alumni, and we played against the Celebrity All Stars. So Jason Priestley was in the game. He came down, played
Oh, wow.
against guys that won Stanley Cups, Hall of Famers,
And you
Bill
set this all
Ranford.
up. This was all something you organized to help Alzheimer's
Yes, and some of the
research.
criticism of that game specifically was that I'm not one to delegate. I do not delegate. We're I delegate more now than I used to. But in my career and in my charitable events, there was one of the things that had I been able to delegate more, we might have seen different results. They were all successful in their own way, but that was a very big project, and I should have taken more advantage of the resources that were around. Or asked for help. I don't ask for help either. They're rare. So that was in October, November of '99 was the first charity event we did there.
And so it was during that. So you did that, and Zach was a child after the
first game. Yeah, he was an infant for that second game, and then
second game, right? And meeting. So what was the circumstances of your relationship with his mom? You met.
So this is a deep story as well.
Yeah.
And I'm sensitive. I never really told it in deference to his mother, because I know how she may be viewed. But I will say this: I was engaged to Zach's mom. We found out we were pregnant. She decided that the relationship wasn't for her. She gave the ring back. She left. She told me that she lost the baby. And so that was June, maybe May of 2000. And then the next time we spoke was December. There was an explosion in my neighborhood. And one of the refineries, I lived near the gas company. And I was family was in town, and it was probably around this time of year as well, because my niece and nephews were up from Florida, my sister. And I was at the movies with my nephew, and my pager started going off. And my pager. So,
pager, wow. Yeah, right?
Yeah. And
wow.
all 911s. And when I get out, I step out of the movie, I call my uncle, and I find out that there was a big explosion right in front of the house, and everyone was evacuated. So my mom, my sister, and the kids, they drove to my brother's house in New Jersey. So in any event, that was that December. And then, but she never said anything about the baby. And then we went to the cemetery in January of 2001. The song Arms Wide Open came on the radio. And I thought to myself, well, geez, if Shanna didn't lose the baby, I'd be a father by now. Lo and behold, my phone rings February 24th, 2021. 2001 rather. Mm-hmm. And it's his mother. And she says, "Are you home?" I say, "Well, yeah." She still doesn't tell me anything. She says, "Can I come over?" I said, "Okay, sure." We had never had a chance to talk, reconcile, like what happened. And when she came, she had Zachary with her.
Oh my God.
So it was a Saturday night. I had a pizza in the oven. I was just chilling. Like I just came home. It was wintertime, and then she brings me my son. And
what?
So early on, we tried our best to visit and stay involved. And unfortunately, because of where she was, where I was, there were issues there. And, so we had to formalize things, and I went ahead and, I got custody and set up support for Zach. And that kind of was the road that we started on. So again, in the entirety of our relationship, I mean, this was a day one initiative, I mean, if you will, like, that's my boy. And as close as we were, I mean, it was just the circumstances surrounding his birth, whether he knew or didn't know, or whether it was, things were misrepresented. The circumstances of his birth were a little tough, and I'm sure that might have hung over his head. I mean, coming from a two-parent household is not easy. And it wasn't easy for him for a while. But eventually he spoke up.
So you were together.
We were not together when he was born.
No, you weren't, because she left and said, "This isn't for me." Gave you the ring back. I lost the baby, and then a few months later shows up with this infant at your house. Mm-hmm. That's your son,
and he was 6 weeks old when I met him.
Yes, and then you And then but you didn't reconcile as a couple. You just had joint custody for a while, or?
So no, we didn't reconcile. So really, it was clear that I made it clear. I mean, listen, I mean, we're at where we're at, but we got to figure out what we're going to do with Zach.
Uh-huh.
I went to see him the next day, was setting up times during the week. And then, those times were not being honored and whatever was going on, I perceived it as, well, geez, things are changing. I don't like where this is going. And that's where I went to a lawyer and to protect all of us.
Yeah.
But it wasn't received very well. So,
Yeah.
and then
And
by
you
the time,
and you were working at the law firm at that time too.
so by then I had changed assignments, but yeah, I was still with that company, and
Uh-huh.
she actually eventually came to work with that company as well. Which was one Christmas. The last picture we had together, I believe, is at a Christmas party of ours, and I had it set aside in Zach's little memory box because for a child, I mean, regardless of the situation, it may feel neat to see his parents together when back in the day, but.
So
Um,
you went to a lawyer, you got a lawyer,
mhm.
and then you ended up getting full custody
So no,
on
we
Zach.
shared custody. We
You
shared
shared
custody.
custody.
We had a very, the arrangement was set that since I initiated, I wanted to get as much time as I could with him, to the degree possible. And with the passage of time, I was able to get more and more time. And when she couldn't have him, and she called me, I jumped to pick him up and
Hmm.
keep him and stuff like that. And then by the time I'd moved to Jersey and he was 14, 15 years old, he's feeling a certain way as well. He felt a restlessness. He changed high schools as well.
Wow.
And he asked to come live with me. And I said, okay,
Hmm.
Zach, I hear you. You're heard. This is a big thing. And as long as you trust me, I'll do what I can and we'll get this going.
Hmm.
So don't worry, and we'll go from there. And luckily, when I had the conversation with her, she was not rigid, and she accepted the fact that he expressed that, and she honored it. And we're very happy that it wasn't difficult at all to
Okay.
move forward for
And so
him.
from the time he was 14, he was under your care
Mm.
full
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And
So
what were you doing for work around that time when
So
he
I
was?
was still with, I had joined a company, Alpha Broder, in 2004. I was out of work for 3 years. So here's another interesting fact.
Yeah.
When he was born, I was at an old job. I was let go of my job when Zach was 10 months old. Um,
Wow.
and so a new father, out of work,
Oh my God.
how do I keep my son on benefits? How do I do this and
Hmm.
that? It was a 3 year period. But I had prayed, like I had prayed with my whole heart. I just want more time with my son. But within the context of, yes, I can also earn a living and have time
Yeah,
with my
exactly.
son.
Yeah.
Okay, well, here's one way to do it. And I got
Mm,
fired and,
mm,
um, and I was able to spend a lot of time with him. And in retrospect, it's just recognizing, well, geez, you got fired and oh, poor me. But it was not, I was let go of that job so I can have those 2 years with Zach in those informative
mm,
years and really pour myself into learning how to be a father and protecting and teaching him. And even to the degree I still have it. It's the Midsummer's Night Dream painting, and
mm,
it's on a line bound book that someone had given me, and it had the little page marker. And in my mind, I always thought that I would die young, and I think we talked
mm,
about this before. My
mm,
The intuition where you thought that my rational side was was preempting the intuition. You remember that?
mhm. Yeah.
And it took a while to get to the point where I wasn't doing that anymore. And I
Mm,
was seeing things for what they were, even though they may be disturbing. And understanding that what I felt was most likely that I would lose Zach, not that I would lose, not that I would pass away. But I wrote the book and wrote these basically an instruction manual for Zach over time in case I wasn't here. And so it was kind of memoirs to him and just like, hey, about bullies and girls and life and what's going on and my fears and my love for him and, what's going on with his mother and the world. And I still have it. I put it away, but that was a leave nothing to chance moment for me. I say it to this day. I said it to Deanna, and that's kind of how I live. Leave nothing to chance. I wrote it, and I have it, and I don't go into it anymore. I would read it from time to time, but certainly it's a memento of love, for him in that situation.
Yes. Yes. Wow.
So on the intuition front, the other thing that I wanted to touch on is the manifestation aspect of things. I've had so many chance encounters with people over time, and I had this one years ago. I can't quite remember where it was, but someone who said that I was an old soul, not just an old soul, but an ancient soul. It freaked me out. I had no idea, I knew that there were things I didn't understand, and I never closed my mind to anything. In terms of the belief system, nothing was ever too beyond the pale. I've always known about UFOs. There were things that I've always known, and what in my chart, is a testament to that. And I think you touched on it, but, the manifestation side, I finally have come to understand what it's all about.
What is that for you?
Well, I could look back clearly on things that are trivial. And, I loved the Flyers when I was a kid. I was, I was a hockey guy, and I wanted them to win a Stanley Cup. And I loved wrestling, and I loved the Road Warriors. And, I wanted a wrestling belt, all these. But you don't realize the degree that you want these trivial things until one day, 20 some years later, you find yourself in touch with the guy who used to make the wrestling belts for the Road Warriors, who's licensed to make these replicas, to email them and to have it was a modest amount. They're not a $20 belt you buy at Walmart, but it's a legit replica, the weight, everything, the painting, handmade belt. Wow. And it was one of those things. It's like,
and you have one?
Yeah, I learned to treat myself eventually. I worked hard. I was very fortunate in my career. I ended up, as much as I tried to talk myself out of what ended up being windfalls of means. I don't want to say money. It just means resources. A windfall that was life altering.
And what was that? How did that come about?
Through work, through real estate. So here's a funny story.
Yeah.
So my change from operations and leadership within the company I was at, I was always touching real estate. And the company I worked for, they lease warehouses around the country, and they are they're an international company with probably 5 million square foot in warehouses. So one day I was trying to help a friend locally find a warehouse. And I said to him, Mike, let me know if you want to see some spots. I'll talk to our broker, a friend of mine, and see if he can help me out. And I'll go to this building with you to kind of be the eyes and ears on the ground. And so when I asked my broker friend, I said, listen, I got a buddy. I want to bring him to a building. And I said, maybe you throw me a gift card. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you hook me up. It's a referral for him because he would have been the beneficiary of the business because I was not licensed. And he says, well, you don't have your license? And I was like, no, I don't have my license, but I'll get it. So literally, I just finished my bachelor's degree because all during when Zach was a baby and I was home, that's when I went back to college. So it was my 10-year or 11-year degree. So by the time I was 30, I started, and it took me 11 years to finish on and off my bachelor's in business management.
So you got that when you were in your early 40s?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And then once you're working at that clip, like literally, I took 12 classes in a year,
Uh-huh.
and then I come off, and you have this sense of accomplishment, right? And so then all of a sudden you have this introduced to you. Well, your real estate license. Okay, that's an accomplishment. Let's see what it takes. I was through the pre-licensing education within 2 months, completed that, was able to get my license number. I went to broker school, completed all the broker education with the intent of going right out as a broker and using, bringing the company business, instead of managing it in-house as I was, taking it and being the outside broker and then being the client instead of an employer. Long story short, when I had done that and taken the business, I was, working with a company in New Jersey, and there was a large warehouse renewal going on in Pennsylvania, and the gentleman at the time who worked for the owners was. I think he was trying to pull some shady stuff, and I was protecting the interests of the company. And essentially, what was at stake was that an 800,000 square foot building in which my company that I represent operated half. They had a first right of offer on the expansion space. Well, there's also language that the brokers were looking at. Um, they got stalking horse proposals to be granted to them so that it forced Alpha Broder to actually meet price.
Hmm.
And much to I'm looking at the justice of it all, and I'm working with the executives in the company. I'm telling them what's happening. Like, look, this is what they're doing, and I don't like it. I don't like it on behalf of the company. And long story short, the powers that be went above my head. They made the deal at the executive level, which was fine because I didn't want to be held responsible for someone else's bad behavior within the company. And it's a deal that that I was compensated for, and but I what I was trying to do, and the deal that I was trying to get done for the company would not have been as lucrative. Then it didn't make sense. So my good intentions to save money for the company did not come through. So I made more in terms of the windfall than I would have if I got my point across and held the line and was able to get the company what I thought was best for it.
Hmm.
So and it was transformative, and that is probably 2016, summer 2016.
Interesting. Wow.
and,
Okay.
and so
That's
whatever was
so
going on there,
fascinating.
whatever was going on there, certainly in terms of Jupiter expansion, I'm assuming would have
Well,
a
so
hand in some of that.
so you're saying that this deal that was being done, you saw something shady happening there, and
Yes, the
and
conduct of
you wanted
the
to
conduct.
report it, but they went over your head and did the deal anyway, and because it wasn't reported, you ended up making more money because you
I
weren't
try to
able
do the
to.
right thing.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
what's interesting about 2016, and this is coming up a lot in these interviews that I'm doing, is 2016 is a big year because 2016 is a 9. And next year, 2025, or this year coming up here, is also a 9. And
Mm.
so, nines are years that represent like completion or transformation or starting of something new. So it's almost like even though you weren't able to give the say what was going on, like you were rewarded for your good behavior in some way that gave you the means to expand your life in more meaningful ways.
It gave me the ability to control more of my time,
Yeah.
and when you get instances down the line from that, it was the reason. Though certainly COVID, as horrible as that was, I was divorced already. I had so I guess
So
I am skipping a little bit.
yeah, so you were
But
married to somebody.
fatherhood,
You were
fatherhood
married.
and
Yeah.
academics and charity from 2002 to 2012. Like
Uh-huh.
the completion of that, and then at age 40 to 46, I changed my job. I got divorced, and there was a lot of travel,
So
and
you were married to somebody else
yes,
that wasn't Zach's mom, and
yes,
right, okay, and then you got a
yeah,
divorce.
yeah. Her
Yeah.
and I were married in 2013, and then we were divorced by the end of 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, but we were
Okay.
separated. I mean, we were separated that whole year of 2019. So it was really like
Mm,
Zach and I in the house for that whole period. And then 2020 with COVID, we were even more relegated to, that close contact, quarters together. And
yes.
there's the butting of heads, there's testosterone lows and him growing into himself and me figuring myself out. But it was also a magical time. I mean, when I traveled to, um, I went to Barcelona and Madrid in August of 19. And when I tell you the trip that I went to Barcelona was life changing, and in my spiritual
What happened there?
growth. Well, in Barcelona, I went by myself. I indulged in the food and the wine and the sights, the beautiful cathedrals and the churches and nature and being in the water. And they had a nude beach, believe it or not. And I saw it the first day. I didn't. My eyes didn't linger too long as I made my way down the beach and explored. But my last day in Barcelona, I made a decision to that I was going to go and go naked in the water and just see what happens. So
Yeah.
I had my school bag, I had my water and Cliff Bar, and marched on. It was probably like a 15-minute walk to the water. Not much of a beach. It was very uncovered. There's stones and
Yeah. Not
gnarly, you
not
know,
sand.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, then I dropped my stuff in a pile and I walked down into that water. And Scott, when I tell you, I frolicked. The word I always use is
Mm,
frolicked.
hmm.
And being in that water and being in your natural state and um, being able to just shut your brain off and take it
Hmm.
all in, that was magical.
Hmm.
It changed my life. It really
Wow.
did. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's so fascinating. Okay, so I gotta reflect a couple things here because I'm hearing, first of all, just back to like the real estate stuff. It's like Capricorn is the sign that rules real estate. And so the fact that your north node is in Capricorn and you have found a lot of success
Mm.
in real estate, I mean that's you following your north node. Now, like the Barcelona experience of being in your natural state in the ocean. I mean, that's you're
Water energy.
the
Yeah.
crab, and it's like when you're able to connect to a natural source of water in that way, it's cleansing the physical manifestation of your soul and reconnecting you to the source of who you are. Yeah.
And that happened
Yeah.
in every possible way. That's great.
Yeah.
And it's
Amazing.
interesting. And independently of that, two projects. So in terms of being able to, mind you, so everything that I did was for my family, right?
Hmm.
So you get there, you achieve a level of success, you achieve a level of security, and then you say, all right, well, no, manage your resources. And I learned a story years ago. My brother's ex-wife's uncle, he purchased land in San Diego, $20,000, X amount of acres, that was purchased 20 years later for $21 million by San Diego State University.
Wow. Wow.
So what I was able to synthesize from that is buy as much land as you can for as little as possible. Now,
Hmm.
obviously, you have to buy smart, and I'd set
Yeah.
up multiple search engines, and this also intersects with past lives. I had been I haven't been more clear on my history, not just past lives within this incarnation, but the lives that Deanna and I shared previously. The interests that I have, and really, the facts that you say. Well, if you're interested in gardening now, it's because of this in past lives. I had been fortunate enough to locate a couple of properties as well. So on the real estate front, it's also land purchases and being able to have um, have that set aside and being able to use it when need be. But the land resources, one was it was a timber lot,
Okay.
and basically I got I inquired about the property. The lady sent me a report. 71 acres of of wooded hilly property,
Uh-huh.
granite, natural granite, and 26 species of trees, sugar maples, and oak, and I went to hike this beautiful land. I bought it sight unseen simply because the numbers she showed me and the value of the timber stock after it was logged was more than what they were asking for the property.
Hmm.
So it was this, the purchase, it bought itself, and then also land in Canada that dropped into my lap. That was also had a timber feature, but has patented mining claims.
Hmm.
So now I take off, being built to learn and understand what I'm dealing with. I launch on two different paths. I'm learning as much as I can about forestry, timber and wood products, and the land in that area. And then on the other front, I'm learning about the patent mining claims and gold and geology and understanding that there was discovery on this property before. And as late as 2011, there was junior mining companies that had worked the land and done more exploration and had intersected gold. And I had always gold had been a thing. Like I didn't
Yeah.
know where it fit,
Yeah.
coins, gold, and everything else into my
Well,
life.
this
And
goes
this,
back again to your Leo rising,
mm,
because Leo, the metal that is associated with Leo, I mean, Leo is the sovereign sign, it's the king, it's gold.
that,
Yes, and that's your rising sign.
and it's funny because I come up with these little hooks. And one of the things that I wanted to throw at you just because I think I'm clever was this what was it? These astrological synchronicities
Yeah, yeah.
that I used to look at horoscopes. They're not forecasts, and unfortunately, people had gone so long and just thinking that the thing in the newspaper just dictates their life. Like, how poor
Mm,
is that,
yeah,
right?
yes.
And then you taught me everything that I needed to know to be conversant and then better understand, myself. And then you can use it as an affirming astrology, which is what I don't do it for the affirmation. It's just the simple fact of dialing in and looking at the app really quickly when I'm having a certain day that sticks out, and then going, wait a second, it's telling me that I'm going to have projects around the house, this, that,
Mm,
and the other, whatever. And at the end, at the end of the day, I can, to my credit, say I hung these curtains, I hung three paintings, literally work around the house, and all of these things that I take as a sign that, like, hey, man, if you need to know whether or not you're doing the job and you're doing what's right, this is your evidence.
mm,
These synchronicities are saying that you are in tune with the universe. The actions are not necessarily the be all end all, but you are in tune. And that that kind of leads me to now, and the fact that the last 4 years, like I said, going back to you know um, regaining my footing as Drew.
mm,
Um, Being able to pour 2 years of of friendship and build my friendship with Zachary
mm,
in those 2 years was priceless. Marriage and coming into marriage again in September of 21 with Deanna, and having gone through and asking you to help us to pick a date, and
mm.
having the most incredible ceremony, and
Oh,
I
wow.
don't know if you ever saw our
I,
you ever see our you ever see our wedding picture.
I feel like maybe you shared it with me.
You might have seen it
Uh,
on, because our
yeah,
photographer, I'll share it on Instagram, but it
yeah,
was a full moon in
yeah,
Pisces.
yes. That's what we picked that date.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, sitting behind
yes,
us, and we went
yes.
up
No, I
the
remember. Yes,
the
beautiful.
building was such the boathouse that it had a top little piece where we were able to go in
Yes.
and on the observation deck, and they had it timed just right. And Ryan and his assistant had us up there, and we spent 10-15 minutes, and we got
Oh,
the most
magical.
beautiful shots. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So
I do remember helping you pick that date and the full moon in Pisces. I remember that. And I think I can envision, I think I did see the photo with the moon in the background. I just want to say also like when you talk about these astrological synchronicities, because like you have one of the most interesting ones I've ever seen with Deanna,
mm,
because, there are 1,728 possibilities of primal triad combinations: the sun, the moon, and the rising sign. So there's 1,728 different possibilities. And and Zach was born with the sun in Capricorn, the moon in Scorpio, and the rising sign Gemini. And a few months after he died, you reconnect with Deanna, and Deanna was born with the sun in Capricorn, the moon in Scorpio, and Gemini rising. But what makes it even crazier is that Zach was born with Gemini rising at 26 degrees. Deanna was born with Gemini rising at 25 degrees. Deanna was born with the sun in Capricorn at 26 degrees. Zach was born with the sun in Capricorn at 27 degrees. And they were both born with the moon in Scorpio at 13 degrees. I don't know what the odds are for it to be almost all three at the exact same degree. I mean, the moon is at the exact same degree. The sun and ascendant are only a degree apart, but I mean, I have to imagine it's in the millions
yeah, it's
for
mind
like the
boggling.
odds. It's just like, wow. I remember like, what is this real? So it's like she is like filling, this space in some way that he vacated. And yeah, so it's really
Yes,
mind boggling.
the yes, it's a we live in an amazing world. It's not the greatest place to be sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but if I have a rule that if it's not happening in front of me, it's not happening.
Mm.
So it's funny that I did move away from New Jersey just as the fun started with these UAPs and everything else. But I have seen them out here actually. I am a very avid. I study the sun.
Mm.
That's another thing. Over the last 2 years, I've really become drawn into and been able to actually feed the passion of actually the space weather and the sun and solar storms and
Mm.
CMEs and the interaction and actually to the degree that it impacts us on Earth
Mm-hmm.
in so many different ways. We think that the moon is impactful, right? We always used to say, "Oh, it's a full moon, and all the lunatics come out," and it affects women because of the water in our bodies and everything
Mm-hmm.
else, and well, it's everything affects it. Some of them are
Mm-hmm.
obviously more obvious than others, but
Mm-hmm.
we're affected by every spinning atom.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know?
And you're so in tune with your environment and what's going on in the cosmos, but also like this land speculating. So that's what you're doing. It's like land speculating. Like, okay, here's
So the
land. Let's
speculation is over,
yeah,
and now it's just been so back to the manifestation part.
yeah,
Um, there are so many ways that people would like to train others to manifest, and we see it
hmm,
every day on Instagram, and it's good in a way because it opens people's eyes to other ways of doing. But I've come to recognize that much in the same way as the church, if you identify as a Byzantine Catholic which I am, and
mm,
we're a Roman Catholic. The
hmm,
Roman Catholic faith has developed a Roman Catholic ceremony for liturgy, and they have feast days, and they're known as Christmas and Easter, and there is a choreography of these different acts, and in its entirety, it's a ceremony. But the prayers, it's the intention behind it, and what I've come to find that what I've been doing is a set it and forget it type thing. I'll reaffirm it. I will remind it that, hey, I understand it's not time yet, but it doesn't hurt to also reaffirm this is still something that I believe is a need, and I understand that it will come when it's ready. And I've been freed of even a manifestation of a lot of the, because there's, when it comes to health and desperation, I mean, there's things you can affect and you can't affect, and I recognize that. But to be able to be confident in the fact that all of our needs are taken care of every day, okay? There's a Naval Ravikant he's a philosopher. I ran into him on Joe Rogan podcast, and one of the things that I stuck with me is that retirement is defined by people in different ways, and classically, retirement is you're working until you're 60, 65 maybe. You might not be able to bend over, you might be injured, whatever. But if you may have a pension, or you may get your IRA or your 401k, and then you can relax. And people, unfortunately, have surrendered so much of their life to that, anarchic, system.
Mm-hmm.
And so if our needs are met every day, and we're blessed that they are, and we're, that we have control of our time, and the fact that, I wouldn't have been able to do any of this that we did for Mom or Deanna if it were not for real estate, that occurrence back then. The fact that I was a caretaker, Deanna and I were caretaker for Mom, and then I was Deanna's caretaker is also something I wanted to ask about in this period over the last, from 22 and through 23 and this year. What do you see in the chart from that may be just transiting in a caretaker, or is it a more permanent thing that I just, am growing into now?
Well, when you think about what's been going on over the last 2 years, you're saying, Neptune has been in strong aspect with your son, and, especially last year and 2022 is when it was making the strongest aspect to your son. And the Neptune is that planet of compassion and empathy. And so there's also, Pluto last year, this part of this year, 2022, transiting through your sixth house, the house of service, opposing Mercury in your 12th house, the house of the unconscious, the house that represents compassion and empathy. Mercury is also the planetary ruler of the sixth house, the house that Pluto is transiting through, the house of service. So going through, and Pluto at the final degree opposing your Mercury is also squaring your midheaven IC line at 29 degrees in Aries and in Libra, which means, a death to the mother or a parent or a father, transformation. So that's all something that's been happening. But I'm curious, when you talk about manifestation, are you familiar with your human design chart?
No.
Because you're a specific manifester according to human design. So it's very interesting that, you had this desire for this wrestling belt, and now you have the belt. Maybe you didn't get it in the way that you thought you wanted to get it, but that is just part of you working on the specificity that you need to work on in order to manifest what you desire in your life. Because there are, like you said, a lot of people on Instagram or social media that say, this is how I have the answer. It's like a one size fits all jumpsuit. Just listen to me and I'm going to tell you how to figure out life. what they're telling you is how they figured it out for
Yes.
themselves.
You
Doesn't
had to
necessarily
find your
mean
magic.
doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for, everyone else or anyone else for that matter. But for you, like, there's specific and non-specific manifestation. And like the best example that I can think of in terms of a specific manifestor, which is you, is Jim Carrey, who is famous for like going on like Barbara Walters and Oprah and talking about how, when he was a struggling actor comedian, he would drive up to the like Mulholland Drive and look out over Los Angeles in the middle of the night and just stare out at all the twinkling lights in the LA basin or the valley, and just think of all the famous actors and directors, his favorite ones, and they all wanted to work with him. And he didn't drive back down the mountain until he actually believed it. And then he wrote himself a check for $10 million dollars and dated it. And by the time the date came, he had $10 million dollars and he could cash that check. So that's what you are working on in terms of specific manifestation, and especially in terms of your North Node in Capricorn in the fifth house. So it's about tapping into your heart, your sense of joy and fun, and being very, controlling and specific about what it is you want to achieve. Like, if I'm going to buy this land, then I want to know exactly what this land is worth, and not just because they're telling me this is what the price is and so that's what it's worth. It could be worth more or less than that, depending on what's actually there. They discovered something there in 2011, some gold. It's like, okay, so there's something there, or, there's timber and all that sort of stuff. So you're doing like your due diligence to be very specific about what's on the land so that you can manifest uh, owning the land or building yourself a fortune or whatever that may be.
Right. And that was the intent. Initially the intent was legacy, right?
Yes,
For Zach
that's the
and
key
then
word for
for,
Capricorn
you
is
know,
legacy. Yes. So
but
continue though. Yeah.
but the universe knows that the legacy is it's a different legacy that I'm leaving. It was not, and the legacy will still be there, and that's
Mm-hmm.
still my focus. But yeah, it's just a little different, you know.
Yes. Yes,
But
because it's no longer being left to Zach.
mhm,
So
mhm, yeah,
yes.
but
Hmm.
um, the other thing in terms of manifestation, you know I think that the analogy when we were just talking about the gold and the digging is that you know in the manifestation, if you want to unlock, if I'm unlocking the value of the land,
Mm-hmm.
okay, through my manifestation, and as an individual, we need to unlock our values. We have to unlock what we can bring, and whether or not that comes through form of a brush on a paper or such, or if it comes
Hmm.
out in a podcast or a song or a poem. I started writing haiku. I've written a ton of haiku.
Hmm.
As another kind of side exercise.
Yeah.
I do recognize the power of creation. I do recognize that art is not, again, always a paint, crayons,
Yeah.
pencil medium. Like creation is like the work that we did, Deanna and I, joyfully decorating the house.
Mm-hmm.
It's the care with which we prepare our meals. We cook together.
Yes.
We do everything
Yes.
together,
Mm-hmm.
and it's that is the fuel. That
Mm.
is the joy. That is the juice behind the manifestation. That there is joy in our way of life. We live joyfully, and we control our time, and that is not something that will be taken from us.
Yes. You're saying all the key words for your North Node in Capricorn, the fifth house: joy, control, time. These are all frequencies of that fifth house Capricorn North Node. I just think it. Your legacy is creation, and what you leave behind. It's about creating something, bringing it into reality, sharing that with, it's like you said, like your creation, whether it's the podcast or the children's book that you wrote for Zach, or anything that you're doing to create, decorating your home, it is that's your legacy. The legacy is what you create and bring into reality, and the right people that are meant to receive that message from you are going to receive it. That's it. But the more that you're living from that center point of your joy, and in doing the work that you enjoy, the more that you're going to attract the right people into your orbit.
And unfortunately, again, I mean, extracting ourselves from the matrix. I hate to say it; it's just so schlocky, right? But it's a literal thing. And folks are starting to wake up, and I think that whatever time we have left, maybe we can just turn to now the future. And my interests have always been varying. And I think that that's why my stint at MCS, being able to work for one company but being assigned to different industries. I've worked in law firms, I've worked in architectural firms, I worked in financial investment and advising.
And in those jobs, what are you doing at these different firms? The architectural,
so in the architectural firm, that was an early on job, and again, it's funny because I think that we in our travels, I come to learn that geographically, I had been pulled to Cherry Hill long before we moved there. Okay, so whether it was taking Zach to the Cherry Hill Mall as an infant because they had the pet store, and we'd go in, walk the mall, ride the rides, see the pets, or even the field that we tried to get on. There was a field that eventually became Camden Catholic, where Zach ended up going to high school. That's their high school field. But we had a football, and we knew there was a goalpost there. And all we wanted to do is as he's growing up, be like, hey, let's go and kick the football on this field over here. Yes. Not realizing that, 8 years later, he'd be graduating high school from there. So
that's part of your specific manifestation.
Being pulled to Cherry Hill in so many different ways. I worked in the mall as an 18-year-old. I worked at All on Pain. I wore one of these French hats and was baking croissants at first thing in the morning, and stuff like that right out of the gate. So the pulls to Cherry Hill were obvious. Especially when we come to live there and make a home that we just left. We don't live in Cherry Hill anymore. We moved to PA and we settled in a new home at the beginning of October. So that might chart out a different way. But now looking forward, this is I'm working my inbox. I'm clearing it. So any of these things, whether it's finding, again, there's haiku, I wrote just for Deanna. There's haiku that I wrote, and whether it's Zach, Mom, therapeutic. I set some to images using AI. I think that AI is going to play a big part in where I go in the future.
So what's your focus there?
Well, I've been so part of and anyone who's listening who's willing to give me a hand with this, I don't mind asking for help, because I know that this is meant to be birthed into existence. But the storyline that I wrote, if I could have drawn it, I page by page, I had the whole thing mapped out, what each page would look like, what would be on there. And so what I endeavored to do was work with a software that would have helped me to make a video that I would host on the Unpacking Grief website. And again, whether, watch it and, whether it earns income or not, it's creating content that would have been the book, that would have been AI image generated along with AI narrated, and the music. And then I would have taken the PDFs from that and used that to go into another company and have maybe a web book done or an actually hard copy book done from that. So that brings it to life in a couple of different formats.
And what are you bringing to life? The children's book?
The children book. It's called It's called The Alley Cat. It's about a little girl who was young and not feeling well and sick, and her friends wanted her to come and play, and she was of the mindset that she was too sick to play, too sick to enjoy life. And then a talking cat manages to make its way into her bedroom, and she rediscovers the joy of being connected. And it sounds like a very heavy thing, but articulating that from a child standpoint, I mean, it has application. I'm talking to Deanna about it. Going through COVID babies, children who actually legitimately were relegated to their bedrooms for we don't know how parents were dealing with their children in these times.
Yes.
So I thought that the relevance, especially now, it could resonate. And then in terms of, I always at family gatherings, my aunt and uncle, they had a farm up in Schaeferstown, PA, and it was country, and it was a safe, enjoyable space for me as a child, especially with the house in so much turmoil. So when we were visiting family, we knew that there was I can breathe. And we would enjoy going up there. They'd have a band, and I found myself on an open mic telling very inappropriate jokes for my age at that time. And I was a hit, man. I know the reaction I got. My cousins were very proud of me, and it opened something in me. And I've always been, humor was a cloak for me for a long time, a cloak of emotion, a cloak of, me, to keep people light. I really resonate with very few people, but I've had the itch to do stand-up comedy, and I've been watching a lot of it, and I've been writing and doing some small bits and bringing my life experiences, which I could probably write a book. My mom said that she sees me writing a book. Deanna thinks I'm cheating by not writing another book in addition to the existing one that I'm trying. So I think she wants to get 2 books out of me. But in any event, I think that I might have enough
For
of
sure.
life to do a book on that front. But yeah, so doing stuff like that, and there are a few comedy clubs up in this area, and I'm going to go for it, and for no other reason than to entertain. And I think that I'm stepping into my Leo. So it's tying back to what you said, and all this Leo energy. I really feel like I'm stepping into my Leo rising.
Well, it's funny because the Leo rising, that is where you're putting out that cloak, you said, of like playfulness and the laughter, and like everything's good out on the surface. That's very much Leo rising. But actually, when you're talking about the comedy, I think of comedy is more in attuned with your Aquarius moon. Like I see so many, like the 2 signs that jump out to me the most for comedy people are Sagittarius and Aquarius, because Sagittarius is just like the truth teller. They're saying things that like other people won't, but it's like they say it and it's like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. But I feel the same way, but I'm too afraid to say that. Where Aquarius, your Aquarius moon, Aquarius has that kind of same frequency where it's just so like matter of a fact. It's like very logical. There's like a coldness or a harshness to it.
Dry. I'm a dry. I'm a dry man. I feel dry, cerebral.
Exactly. So like some of other people that were born with an Aquarius moon, old time comedian Red Skelton. I don't know if you remember him, but
Barely, yes.
he's before our time. But look up Red Skelton. Leslie Nielsen.
About George Carlin, can we have any George Carlin in the house?
George Carlin. Let me see. George Carlin. George Carlin is a Gemini moon, but he's also a Leo rising. He's Leo rising at 14 degrees. You're 10 degrees. And Yeah. So George Carlin shares 1/3 of your primal triad. So you think of Leo Rising, he's there in the mix. Who else is Leo Rising? It's a
You got any?
comedian.
Do you have Tom Segura in there?
No, I don't have
There's
his
no
time of
George,
birth.
right? That's fine. Yeah.
Who else? Who else? Chris Farley is a Leo Rising.
So I'll
Uh,
tell you, it's funny you
yeah.
brought up Jim Carrey. From a comedy standpoint, I think that the physical nature of I didn't enjoy Robin Williams as a physical comedian. I didn't enjoy the exaggeration of it.
Uh huh.
For all my whatever it is, something inside of me, whenever something is exaggerated, it bugs me.
Uh huh.
It bugs me. I
Yeah.
don't know why, but it's not a style of mine. And Jim
Right.
Carrey was so over the top. But we actually
Yeah.
just watched his commencement speech that he gave,
Mm.
and he painted he painted. I don't know if you ever watched it, but he did a painting that he had to have on a scaffold. I think it took him like 2 years to do it, and he
I
brought it
heard
into the
about that. Yeah.
auditorium,
Okay.
and it was what a treat for these young adults to sit there and have Jim Carrey talk to them in the real about the
Hmm.
spiritual side and really side that we didn't get to see of him, or at least I didn't
I
appreciate.
think I did see some of that, if not the whole speech. But yes.
You
Yeah.
know, but, but
Yeah.
but he's someone who didn't disagree with me. I thought Chris
Mm.
Farley was funny, but he also
Over the top.
he follows in that over the top.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
Saturday Night Live, you know,
yeah,
there.
yeah.
So like Leslie Nielsen is also an Aquarius moon. He's more
Mm.
understated. Chevy Chase, Aquarius moon, also a little more understated. Um, Let me see if I can find anyone else real quick.
Kevin
That's
Nealon. I don't know if you have Kevin Nealon, but
Kevin Nealon. I'm not sure if I have his time of birth. No, I don't. Um, but yeah. Hmm.
but that's it's just interesting, those things that some resonate with us, and
Yep.
and
Exactly.
to be honest with it, and you're like, yeah, when things bug me, they bug me in a really really big way. Like, I don't
Hmm.
let it dominate me, but there's just individuals. Travis Kelsey is one of them. The
Travis
Kelseys,
Kelsey.
yeah, the whole phenomenon. First of all, I mean, I'll
You're
be
over
honest with you. We
that.
could do another 2 hours me marching all over the fact that these athletes and the perpetuation of the professional sports in this country
Yes.
is kind of like, I'm done
It's
with it.
absurd. It's
I'm done
absurd.
with it.
Yeah,
And to
totally.
see them at every turn on TV, it's just like, man, like, this is local news. Like, yes, Jason Kelsey retired.
Yeah.
And if they're so well off, have them just start a network and they can report all they want on their own stuff. And we don't have to see it on local news and hear
Yeah.
about, Taylor
Well, that's why
Swift
you
and
got to
all this.
turn off the local news.
I don't watch TV,
Yeah, exactly.
but when we do
Yeah.
have coffee, we do have to get, we have to get some in.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just this. I know what I like. I
Hmm.
know what I don't like,
Yeah.
and I'm not shy to walk towards what will serve us,
Yes.
and the same thing relationship wise. If we're going to close out, Deanna and I, it's we're lucky that we manage our lives and we go through life. The best for us is what is important, right? There's no individuals. We are individuals, but we're twin flames, and
Hmm.
you can't go through life one and the other.
Hmm.
We are one.
Yeah. That's the eighth house energy.
Mm.
Where it's no longer you and me, it's us.
For our best interest.
So
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So what final thoughts would you like to share with the audience, or encouragement,
Well,
or
final
perspective?
thoughts and
Yeah.
encouragements is like I
Yeah.
said, going back to the beginning. I mean, if this is a pep talk, first of all, I don't have any platform or any kind of formal thing set up on Instagram in terms
Mhm.
of making schedules and appointments or whatever. I'd certainly, if anyone reached out to me with something that they didn't necessarily need to see a professional, and there's grief counselors, there's folks out here, but from a life coach perspective, and to be able to just kind of help you reframe your outlook on life. I'd be happy to talk to people, and
Hmm.
I've been lucky where folks have reached out. I've been lucky to understand and learn about some folks who have been lost, and had commented on some of our content on unpacking grief, And it's just for me, it's special that our lost ones aren't forgotten.
Yeah.
Their energy is still here. We can't see them, but um, they're here. With a thought, and like we said, if you've been planning to do something, if you're planning on leaving your job, I'm not saying burn your whole life down, people. I'm going to look at the camera. I'll look at the camera. I'm not telling you to burn your life down, people. So don't come back to Scott or me and say, hey, buddy, we listened to you for 2 hours. You had us convinced. And then I burned my life down because you said so. No, please don't burn your life down. But understand that you can have the things that bring you joy in life consistently, and to the degree where you're not just working joy to joy, joy becomes a way of life for you. The things that you keep running into, the walls. I said to my nephew once, he's 30 something, and the 30 somethings are having a struggle. We'll talk about that another time. But 30 to 35, the set and return, especially now, I don't know what the issue is now. They are getting clobbered. And I think that they're struggling in how they work with others. But the projects, the passion projects, go and step forward and do what makes you happy. We only get one life. Money is not everything, and you'll know if you're doing the right thing. Follow your heart, keep your intentions pure and good, and a lot of good things will happen. And I hope that this year, there's been a lot of upset, a lot of pain. There's a lot of things going on now with our world and other worlds that are just introducing themselves potentially to us that might get a lot of people wound up. Do what makes you happy, but don't hurt anyone, please.
Okay. Well, thank you, Drew. Where can we follow you on Instagram? The podcast is Unpacking Grief. We'll link that in the show notes as well if people want to hear more about your story with Zach and the different interviews that you and Ian did there. But where can we follow you on?
Page, yeah, I'm trying to grab. Again, I'm not a numbers guy, but Instagram at Unpack Grief Pod, Instagram. Okay. And same thing for YouTube. We also have a Facebook page.
Okay.
Don't be shy. Reach out. Kudos, questions, concerns. If you need help, reach out to someone, if not me.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome, Drew. Well, thank you so much. You've been very generous with your time and your energy, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us here on the Weekly Transit. So thank you so much, Drew.
Thanks for the platform.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to the Weekly Transit. Interviews and conversations from an astrological lens. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tajarian. Music written by Ben Leinbach from Listen Deep by Amber Herzog Lyman. If you're interested in being a guest on the Weekly Transit, you can email me at scott@theweeklytransit.com. Wishing you all the best as you ride the planetary waves.